The title of my talk today is called Expedition to the Summit. And it's a journey through the Gospel of John. So in this book, the author brings us on a journey to the top of the mountain. He is our fellow pilgrim, placing signposts to point us in the right direction. He is also our guide. And the second slide keeps emerging, but this one is our trip in 1998 to the top of Gunung Ledang, right? You can see some of familiar faces there, including my husband and myself. And you can see how tall Gunung Ledang is 1276 meters. This one is 20 years later, and it's Mount Yufu in Japan. Now, this climb is 1584 meters, and it took a few hours to finish. The next one is Mount Kinabalu. Unfortunately, I haven't had the chance to climb Mount Kinabalu, but one of my good friends, Joanne, who just scaled Mount Kinabalu, says the effort nearly killed her. But when you get to the top, you really feel close to God. How inspiring. I hope one day I'll be fit enough to climb Mount Kinabalu. Meanwhile, let's dive straight into the Devo. Starting with in the beginning, the author introduces the main themes in the book with many echoes from the first two books of the Bible. By doing so, he was indicating that Jesus is not only God, the creator, he is also very much a part of creation. He is not only the God who brought Israel out of slavery, he still works to free us from slavery. This introductory chapter is like a map. It will help us to navigate the terrain of the book. It tells us where the landmarks are, and it marks out the route we will take. In order to navigate our way safely to the top, the author puts up multiple directional signs. Right from the get-go, the author puts up the first signpost. Jesus is the Word. Just as God spoke creation into existence, Jesus speaks. His words permeate the gospel. It will immediately become apparent that this gospel differs from the other gospels. It consists of long, meandering, intimate dialogues with individuals or with a group of people. You find that you have to slow down to read the book of John, to digest and unpack its dense messages. Jesus' last evening with the disciples lasts 5 chapters in the gospel. Compare that with Matthew, where the Last Supper occupies only 1 chapter. This is the stuff of relationships. Without speech or conversation, there is no connection or intimacy. Jesus slows down. He makes time. A chapter later, we see another signpost. Jesus performs his first miracle. Jesus does not only talk, he is constantly at work in the book of John. He tells his audience, my Father is working until now, and I'm working. Again, the creation theme emerges. A simple word search indicates that the word work, works, or working appears in 31 different verses. Jesus' work encompasses his miracles. We see 7 signs scattered throughout the gospel. Jesus is generous, compassionate, open-handed, and open-hearted to the people around him as he works. We have now cleared the lower part of the mountain. About a third of the way through the gospel, we stumble upon a cluster of signposts, the I am statements. Jesus claims, I'm the bread, I'm the light, I'm the gate, I'm the shepherd, I'm the resurrection and the life. I am the way, the truth, and the life. I'm the true vine. It is an echo of God's name. I am who I am. In doing this, Jesus not only implies that he is God, he also tells us that God is accessible and available to us like the ordinary day-to-day stuff of our lives. What we eat, what we use, people or things we see when we talk, from our flats to the shops, from our work to the food court. The author says, the word became flesh and dwelt among us. and we have seen his glory, the glory as of the only Son of the Father, full of grace and truth. The word glory, glorify, or glorified appears 34 times in the Gospel. This is a theme from Exodus. The Jews call it God's Shekinah glory, the visible sign of his presence. God's glory was seen on Mount Sinai in the pillar of cloud and fire which led the Jews through the wilderness, or the cloud which covered the tent of meeting, and the glory of the Lord which filled the tabernacle. God's Shekinah glory is awe-inspiring. Yet in Jesus, glory occupies the same sentence as dwelt and became flesh. God has embedded himself in our midst. Jesus' glory not only encompasses the mountaintop experiences, his glory also embraces the depths of human experience, the misunderstanding, the rejection, betrayal, ignominy, slander, scandal, suffering, and death. As we follow his signposts, the author draws us into a realization that God is near. He is trying to get us to open up our eyes and to open up our ears, to see what God in the flesh is doing, to hear what God in the flesh is saying to us in the immediacy of our daily lives. Tom Wright, a New Testament scholar, says, he takes us up to the mountain and says quietly, "Look, from here on a clear day, you can see forever. We beheld his glory, glory as of the Father's only Son." John does not include the story of Jesus' transfiguration as the other evangelists do, but there is a sense in which John's whole story is about the transfiguration. He invites us to be still and know, to look again into the human face of Jesus of Nazareth until the awesome knowledge comes over us, wave upon terrifying wave, that we are looking into the human face of the living God. Sadly, many do not reach the summit. Those around Jesus did not get to experience that feeling of awe. They did not experience it because they missed the signpost, wandered off the track, and lost their way. After all, signposts merely point us to something beyond ourselves. They're not the actual article, and we are free to choose which path to take. Let's see what some of these people who lost their way said. The Jews said, "It is the Sabbath, and it's not lawful for you to take up your bed." They were more concerned that Jesus was doing a miracle on the wrong day. Perceiving then that they were about to come and take him by force to make him king, Jesus withdrew again to the mountain by himself. Is not this Jesus, the son of Joseph, whose father and mother we know? How does he now say, "I have come down from heaven"? Will he kill himself since he says, "Where I'm going, you cannot come"? We are the offspring of Abraham and have never been enslaved to anyone. How is it that you say you'll become free? I've long felt that I'm very much like these people in Jesus' day. Hard of hearing, short-sighted and blind. As I read through the gospel, I realize how easy it is to miss the signs or mistake them for something else, particularly if I'm too preoccupied with my own ideas about how God should work rather than how he actually works. I'm too busy with my work to realize that God has just done something remarkable right under my nose. I try to use Jesus for my own agenda rather than be used for his agenda. My own pain, emotions, and worries blind me to what Jesus can do. I think only of my own selfish desires. So how do we ensure we get to the summit? How do we stick to the pathway set out for us? How do we not get into dead ends, detours, and traps? We have to follow experienced guides. For instance, to scale Mount Everest, you need Sherpa guides. They're locals who know the culture, the area, and the people. They prepare the route for mountaineers, fix ropes in place. They carry the necessary climbing kit up the mountain. They have scaled it multiple times. They know the lay of the land and its dangers. I found two such guides in John's Gospel. To get to the summit, we follow in their footsteps. The first person who recognized who Jesus was is his own cousin, John the Baptist. Almost immediately, he referred to Jesus as the Passover lamb. He needed no one to point it out for him. In contradistinction to Jesus' I am statements, he says, I am not the Christ. Jesus baptized with water. I baptize with water, but among you stands one you do not know. Even he who comes after me, the strap of whose sandals I am not worthy to untie. And again, I'm not the Christ. I'm just a friend of the bridegroom. He must increase, but I must decrease. In my opinion, John the Baptist teaches us how to get to the summit. Just get out of the spotlight, get off the stage. You're not the star, Jesus is. Our job is just to look out for Christ and point others to him. It involves paying attention to who God is and what he does, and not only the who and the what, but the how, the means God employs to accomplish his ends. The indicative phrases are, I'm not worthy, and he must increase, I must decrease. We recede into the background. How do we describe this posture? I would term it the fear of the Lord, not simply fear or reverence, but fear of the Lord. The closest example I can think of to describe how this is like is when I'm in the presence of my CEO. I work in an insurance company, and my CEO is a legend in the industry. He built a smallish insurance company into a billion-dollar company, one of the largest, if not the largest, general insurer in Singapore at this point. He's over 70 years of age and has the memory of an elephant. He's good with the macro as well as the micro issues. I've seen him in action during meetings with lawyers. He knows the facts, his mind is sharp, he asks very pointed questions, and he works nonstop. Starting after his exercise in the late morning, his work continues late into the night and through weekends. Before COVID hit, if you wanted to see him for anything, you literally have to take a queue number. Some people, either employees or brokers, have actually waited for hours just to see him. I just watch, observe, and give short replies when I'm in his presence. I'm careful not to say anything inappropriate or stupid. I conscientiously ensure that I do what he says. When he summons me for a meeting, I go no matter how inconvenient. Thankfully, these occasions have been few and far between. Some of my colleagues have experienced receiving his calls in the middle of the night, and they jump to attention. This watching, this waiting, this cautious silence, the attention, the alertness, and the obedience, this is what fear of the Lord looks like. It sounds deceptively simple. Just fade into the background, right? But it is very difficult when we're dealing with our slippery egos. What do I mean? It is so easy to slip from serving the Lord to massaging our egos, attending to someone else's brokenness, to attempting to fix them, which is God's job, sharing what God has done, to implying that the church can't do without me, being busy for the Lord, to keeping busy in order to solve our insecurities, worshiping God, to being preoccupied with whether we hit the right notes or sound harmonious, or worse, criticizing others singing, keeping busy for the Lord, to having no time for the Lord, including on Sundays, assimilating much information about God, to having no chance to listen to God, spending time with God, to taking off quiet times, devotionals, and spiritual disciplines in our to-do list. I can relate to all the above. I often get off the stage only to find myself mysteriously back on stage. I slip out of the spotlight and suddenly find myself blindsided by the bright lights trained on myself. Lord, have mercy. Eugene Peterson says, the primary way in which we cultivate fear of the Lord is in prayer and worship, personal prayer and corporate worship. We deliberately interrupt our preoccupation with ourselves and attend to God, place ourselves intentionally in sacred space, in sacred time, in the holy presence, and wait. We become silent and still in order to listen and respond to what is other than us. Once we get the hang of this, we find that this can occur any place and any time. But prayer and worship provide the base. What has helped me to see God and feel His presence over the past few months is to be part of our sisters' prayer group. There's no leader. We allow whoever feels the Spirit's prompting to share or pray. We had a moving devo from Joyce Chua, who shared about how God helped, comforted, drew close to her during a very difficult period in her life, barely 1 week ago. We share heartfelt prayers, intimate conversations with God, worshipful songs, many, many tears, and we walk away with our hearts more at peace, trusting God more and loving ourselves less. John the Baptist reminds us that the higher we go, the more baggage we should shed. We travel light. We become less, not more. We come now to the second guide. He comes to the fore at the end of the gospel and blends into the background so much that we almost do not notice him. He is the author of the Gospel of John. We find out this fact right at the end of the book. When Peter turned and saw the disciple whom Jesus loved following them, the one who also had leaned back against him during the supper and said, "Lord, who is it that's going to betray you?" When Peter saw him, he said to Jesus, "Lord, what about this man?" This is the disciple who's bearing witness about these things, who has written these things, and we know that his testimony is true. The author of this gospel calls himself the disciple whom Jesus loved. He is nameless, but he's right up there with Jesus, often side by side with Peter, almost like there is a friendly rivalry between the two. He's reclining at Jesus' side during the Last Supper. He entered the courtyard, the high priest with Peter. He stood at the foot of the cross with Mary. He ran to Jesus' tomb with Peter, and he was the first to recognize Jesus by the Sea of Galilee. Traditionally, the gospel is attributed to John, the son of Zebedee, brother of James, but other names have emerged: Lazarus, Thomas, or John the Elder. Scholars obsess about writers and authors because it lends weight to what is written. In the Bible, names describe the essence of the person, all the feelings or aspirations of the parent. For example, John means Yahweh has been gracious. Moses means to draw out. Peter means a rock. Joshua means God saves. They like to stand out and to be unique. Our names give us that individuality and differentiates us from others. No one says, "Oh, that's the most common name for girls, let's pick that." For instance, Elon Musk named his son SH-A12. What on earth does that mean? So why did the author obscure his name? Scholars suggest that it may have been to protect the author from persecution, or so as not to draw too much attention to himself. Whatever the reason, the writer of the gospel seems to suggest, it's fine not to know my name. It is only important to know where I stand in relation to Jesus, that I am the disciple Jesus loved. His life was defined by the one thing that mattered to him. He got his bearings from Jesus' love, and that was his compass in life. And how can one not feel loved by Jesus when, as death closed in, he spent much of his time demonstrating his love for them by washing their feet and assuring them. He faced the powers of darkness by going to the Father with his people on his heart, praying for their protection, their sanctification, and above all, for their unity. When the soldiers came to arrest him, he stepped forward to deflect attention and to protect his disciples while they shrank back in fear. After his resurrection, he made no reference to their painful betrayal, but instead blessed them with a large catch of fish while cooking and enjoying a leisurely breakfast with them. This made me reflect on where my identity comes from. One's identity is the essence of who one is. And I realized that I don't really know. When I was younger, certainly a lot of it was bound up with my parents' wishes and desires. I was very mixed up. Outside, a dutiful daughter. Inside, I wanted to be Frodo or Sam Gamgee. I liked adventure, and Middle Earth was my escape from the usual humdrum of life. As the years passed, my identity became increasingly bound up with what I do. A student, a Christian, a wife, mother, daughter, and worker. But inside, I've become more of Sam Gamgee than Frodo. Getting older makes you less sure of yourself. You'd rather be the assistant than the hero. Even then, it only tells a fraction of who I am. If you ask me to describe my identity in God, I would say I'm a sheep. I often picture myself as a sheep walking next to God, my shepherd. I'm generally compliant. I prefer to follow along. I like to be part of a group of fellow sheep. I enjoy large, open, peaceful spaces and landscapes, both physically and metaphorically. I'm generally contented and I can be pretty blur. And yes, I found a sheep that can scale mountains. It's called the Bighorn. How does our identity in God help us to see Him more clearly? I like what Martin Smith says. Perhaps the disciple is never named, never individualized, so that we can more easily accept that He bears witness to an intimacy that is meant for each one of us. The closeness that He enjoyed is a sign of the closeness that is mine and yours, because we're in Christ and Christ is in us. In other words, the author is saying, any one of us can be like Him, who enjoyed such closeness with Jesus. Whilst our first guide teaches us to travel light, this second guide focuses our hearts in getting our bearings right. Our compass in life is the Lord. In closing, we have explored the long, slow path up to the summit. The goal is to stick to God's path and follow His signposts. We enlist the help of experienced guides so that we don't get lost along the way. The higher we go, the more challenging, as the air thins, the temperature cools, and we work against the pull of gravity. But it grows increasingly tantalizing because we catch glimpses of a wonderful view. Eugene Peterson describes this experience as the long obedience in the same direction. Then one day, we reach a clearing and realize that we're at the summit. We look around and we see a glorious view. We come face to face with Christ, full of grace and truth, and we worship. Thank you so much. That's my Devo for today.
Thank you, Shelley, for using the analogy of climbing a mountain to describe your Christian life. There were a lot of things you shared, but as you were sharing, something that a memory that came to me was when I graduated from university, my whole household, which was all disciples, decided to go and climb this mountain called Mount Washington. And I remember we went to the mountain very early and we had to follow this trail through the forest to go up the mountain. And sometimes there were, on the rocks, there were a little bit of arrow painted on the rocks to tell us go this way or go that way. And I was very surprised that the directions were so vague and so hard to find sometimes. And it was such a struggle to climb up there. And then until maybe 2 o'clock in the afternoon, then we reached the summit. Then the brother turned me around and says, look at the mountain. And we looked all the way down the mountain. You see so far away, there's this car park you were there. And then he showed me some places in the forest where, we were there, and then 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 we were there. And that's how we came up here. And then he says, this is your Christian life. When you are climbing up there, it's very difficult, but you cannot see where you are at. But when you reach on top, then and you look back, then you can see all the markers, like you say, all the signposts of where you have been. Then you appreciate where you've been. And sometimes I think as Christians, we go through tough times. We don't see the big picture. Only when you reach the summit, you look back, then you can see all the challenges you've been through, then make you who you are. So yeah, even I think listening to you, I also see all the markers that challenge you, all the things that happen to you that challenge you to make you submit more to Jesus, or to trust Jesus more, or to decide to make yourself less and Jesus more. And I think that's it's really good to kind of have someone walk before us and tell us what's going to be like, and then we know what to expect as well, and we know what the lessons we are going to need to learn along the way as well. So thank you very much.